Happy Thursday, everybody. And on this show, that's basically Happy Friday, our last show of the week. But we got 4 episodes for you. I think 4 episodes for you next week, getting ready for the Super Bowl and talking about all different kinds of fantasy topics. We welcome you to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sports book born in Vegas. It is bounce back season, baby. We're talking about bounce back candidates. And we're hoping that Heath, I think Heath should be on soon. So we will get to his. Hopefully we'll have 9.
He texted us that he will be here soon.
Oh, great. All right. So we'll have 9 for you. 3 from all of us. Okay. How you doing, Jamey?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Why don't we fire through the news and notes before Heath gets here? There are not many, but we do have 2. We do have Darrell Bevell appearing likely to be the Raiders' next offensive coordinator. They're also bringing back their defensive coordinator, Patrick Graham. But, yeah, a lot of questions to be answered on the Raiders offense. But Bevell will reunite with Pete Carroll. He worked for him in Seattle. What are your thoughts on Darrell Bevell going to the Raiders?
I'd love to see who the quarterback is. I'd love to see who the running back is. I'd love to see who the number 1 receiver is. I mean, you said it. There's just a lot of question marks here. So, you know, sometimes when you have a great system in place, that can overcome, you know, some deficiencies of the players. I don't know if anybody would say Darrell Bevell has the best system because they were, you know, getting sort of tired of him when he was in Seattle, and then they sort of started cycling. That's when they started cycling through a variety of different coordinators. But the run game should be productive for the Seahawks if the right pieces are in place. And so is Zamir White going to be the lead running back? Is Sincere McCormick going to be the lead running back? You know, they're going to go add somebody there. This is a team that has a lot of question marks. And so let's talk about the players first before we even worry about Darrell Bevell and what the play calls look like.
Hello, Heath.
What's going on?
I have come to a conclusion, and I think you should be the first to know.
Okay.
I'm rooting for the Chiefs.
Well, that's fantastic news.
Cleared my head, and yeah, Chiefs it is.
I think the Spags over Saquon thing makes sense. It was I'll tell you, at basketball practice last night, I almost had to extend the practice for an extra 30 minutes for running because my entire 7th grade team is cheering for the Eagles. And when they put their hands in the middle, they all said Eagles instead of our team name at the breakdown after practice. So
even my son?
Well, he didn't object. So he didn't.
So he has this this, you know, fun little, I guess, tradition with my aunt for his birthdays. She gets him a jersey for his birthday, and he has a Kelsey jersey.
Yeah,
I think Kelsey or Mahomes, one of the 2.
He may have just gone along with the crowd
that he wore to last year's Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But now his little brother roots for the Chiefs. His middle brother, they fight a lot.
Yeah,
it might be just to bother his brother.
So yeah, welcome aboard, Adam. I like, historically speaking, over the last 10 years of working with you, I know that generally when you decide to cheer for a team, that works out great for the team you're cheering for. So
this is the first time I've rooted for the Chiefs over the Eagles in the Super Bowl.
I just came in late and I was running a couple errands this morning. Is Darrell Bevell is officially the offensive coordinator?
No,
okay.
No.
So the whole crew is getting back together though, right?
Well, Patrick Graham's the defensive coordinator. That's going to be different.
No, I meant Russ.
Oh.
Tyler Lockett's going to get cut by the Seahawks and go join them.
Maybe they'll trade for Metcalf. We're going to talk about him a little bit later. The Philadelphia offensive coordinator Kellen Moore seems like the favorite to be the Saints' new head coach. They're the only team that still needs a head coach. They haven't hired anyone, so you got to figure there's a reason they're waiting. So we'll talk about the Saints offense in a little bit. Matthew Stafford plans on playing in 2025, but he will likely need a new contract. And I'm going to filibuster here just to look up where he was after Puka and Kupp came back, where he ranked. But what do you think about Matthew Stafford? Do you see any reason to draft him in a 1-quarterback league?
No.
The only way I think you would is if, you know, you like we talked about with Dak Prescott, but a little bit of a lesser degree of I draft Caleb Williams and I want a safe number 2 quarterback in case that guy fails, you know. So I would anticipate if Kupp is back and anything close to being better than he was this year, certainly not elite Kupp. What we saw from Stafford at times from week 8 on was, 20+ point potential, good weather. So he's not going to be horrible. He's just not someone you want to target.
All right, he wasn't even a top 15 quarterback, but not bad. He averaged 19.3 fantasy points per game, which was about 16th or 17th per game and 6 points per passing.
That's for the season.
No, sorry. That was the last 8 games he played, weeks 8 through 17, 8 or 9 games when Puka and Kupp came back.
Right.
So he averaged, just under 20 fantasy points.
And 3 like awful games in there, right? The Dolphins game was bad. The 49ers game was bad. And I think the Jets maybe.
The Jets game, let's see. 3 awful games. See Jamey's memory. Yep. Bad, horrible against the Dolphins. Yeah, very good. Actually 4. Because his last 3 games. Ooh, was he bad in the fantasy playoffs? Matthew Stafford scored 25 fantasy points in the 3 fantasy playoff games at San Francisco, at the Jets, and Arizona. That's horrible. Threw 1 touchdown in 3 games and did not throw for 200 yards in any of them. All right, that's about it. The Jets hired Steve Wilks as their defensive coordinator. That is it for the news and notes. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code FANTASY, and you're going to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. So here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app, you sign up, and you use the bonus code FANTASY. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up. So bounce back candidates. I asked everybody for 3, including me, and I did it. I did my homework assignment. The good thing on this show is that we're not homers. We're very unbiased.
Yep.
So just with that being said, Heath, 3 bounce back candidates for you.
But before you go on, so we used to, when we had our full length episodes of Fantasy Football Today on CBS Sports HQ, we would do starts and sits, and it was always like a race to see who's going to get in their favorite starts and sits. When I hosted that show, I would always let the guys give their players first, to be respectful. Adam, here's what the assignment is, and here are the 3 guys I want to talk about before I let you guys, choose. So that was very selfish of you. Second of all, you forgot that Heath was on the show.
Yep.
And you sent the email to Dan. Dan got all excited. He thought he was going to be on the show, and then you're like, "Oh, sorry, Dan, you're not on the show. It's Heath on the show." So you're doing great this week.
I did get choices 7 through 9 in the bounce back player draft. It was not a snake draft. It was just Adam got 1 through 3. Jamey got 4 through 6. I got 7 through 9.
Honest answer from you. Were you going to choose any of those 6?
What do you mean? Was I going to choose any of those 6 when I didn't know anything about what we were going to talk about on the show before you sent me the 6?
Well, first of all, you had the schedule, so you knew today was bounce back candidates. But when I said we need 3 bounce back candidates from everyone, here are the 6 that Jamey and I have chosen.
Yeah, I'm going to be completely honest, and maybe this is a bad job by me, but I had not scoured the schedule from the previous week and planned out the names that I was going to talk about.
No, but the 6 that we came up with, would you have?
I had not thought about this show in any shape, fashion, or form until you sent me that text message.
I was saying I would have used those guys, but now it's going to be someone else.
I can guarantee he was not going to say Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, that I know. I don't think he was going to say my guy. Maybe Olave. But anyway,
DK definitely would have been on my list. I think Breece Hall and you may just give all your names that you guys put in.
No, that's okay. All right, let's get your names. Your names.
Yeah. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, Isiah Pacheco, TJ Hockenson. One of these guys is just like we've seen a couple of down years from Mahomes, but these guys always bounce back to great performances. You should draft Patrick Mahomes as a top 5 quarterback again next year. Nobody's going to be surprised by that. He averaged 24 fantasy points per game from week 11 on. He's hopeful. I mean, for a fantasy manager, you hope the Chiefs defense just isn't quite as good next year, and we get a few more pass attempts. But also you hope that Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy are both healthy for the majority of the season. And Mahomes maybe has his best receiving core ever. I think we thought that coming into this year, and it didn't quite pan out because of the Rice injury. Pacheco, I was very, very hesitant while he was on IR about anything he was going to produce this year. We've seen guys suffer this type of injury and 9 months later not be quite the same guy with a broken leg. He's not been the same guy. He's not the Chiefs' best running back right now. Kareem Hunt is. But I still think that next year you give him a full off season to fully recover. Isiah Pacheco will be a good number 2 running back for fantasy purposes and the best running back on the Chiefs. Kind of a similar thing with Pacheco and Hockenson. First year back from an ACL, he was very limited in his production, but I expect we get a fully healthy TJ Hockenson in 2025, and he is a top 6 fantasy tight end.
Okay, Mahomes, Pacheco, Hockenson. Jamey, anything you want to say about these guys as bounce back candidates? Mahomes finished as the number 8 quarter. No, sorry, that was his last 9 games. Last 9 games, he did average 24.2 fantasy points per game, but shockingly, that was only 8th best per game. But overall for the season, Mahomes was QB 11, and he was QB 10 per game, actually 11th per game and 4.10th per game and 6 points. So that's Mahomes. Pacheco obviously injured all year, and Hockenson injured for half the season. Your thoughts, Jamey?
I think Mahomes is in contention for QB 6. I don't know if he'll crack the top 5. I think the top 5 will probably end up, barring injuries to receivers, barring holdouts, anything like that. I don't think he's getting drafted ahead of Jackson and Allen. He's not going to get drafted ahead of Jane Daniels at this point. I don't think he gets drafted ahead of Joe Burrow, and I don't think he gets drafted ahead of Jalen Hurts. I think 6 is probably where he'll end up settling. There will be probably some trepidation depending on Kelsey's status, Rice's status. There's a lot of things at play. The Pacheco call, I totally agree with, but I also think, as we've discussed over the last couple of weeks, do they add somebody else, to replace Kareem Hunt, of a younger variety that could come in and maybe compete for touches with Pacheco? Do they bring back Kareem Hunt on a cheap deal and just try and run things back, depending on how things finish? Clearly, it's worked out for them. And then we have, another headache of, just because Kareem Hunt's someone that they trust, does he take goal line opportunities? Does he have, first and second down opportunities? So you look and see here what Pacheco did in his first 2 games. He was awesome. And then clearly he has not been the same since coming back. Hockenson, I'm totally on board with. I think there's, a lot to like if the quarterback situation is right. But you saw what he was able to accomplish. We were talking about this off the air, Heath, before, because Adam was saying, I believe his exact quote was TJ Hockenson sucks. That and then Thomas, crapped all over him. That Hockenson did great, as Thomas alluded to, with Josh Dobbs. So can he be, prominent enough in an offense that has 2 really good wide receivers, one of the best in football, with a rookie quarterback, or maybe Sam Darnold coming back? So there's a lot to love about all 3 of these guys. I just think the Pacheco one could kind of swing either way.
The Hockenson, I was joking. I said he stinks. He doesn't stink. But my concern with Hockenson is that I don't think he's ever been the third fiddle until this year. He really hasn't played with 2 good receivers. I mean, he played with Amon-Ra St. Brown, but like Khalif Raymond. What was last year? Last year was
the same guys.
Well, last year was 2023. I mean, 2023 was Minnesota. He played with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and he had a solid year, but I feel like there weren't a lot of times when all of them were healthy at the same time. Jefferson got hurt, then Hockenson got hurt later. Anyway, I remember not being overwhelmed by his numbers when all 3 of them were healthy, but that it is what it is. Yeah, so that's my thing with Hockenson. But he went as tight. We just did a draft a few weeks ago. He went as tight end 13 in round 10 to Thomas Schaefer. So I'm sure we like that value. Here's my question with Mahomes. Why is it different this year than it was a year ago when we called him a bounce back candidate? It is 2 seasons in a row where he has been a low end number 1 quarterback. He's been right around 10th per game. And he's 2 years in a row where I'm the same guy who said yesterday, I said ADOT doesn't matter for quarterbacks. But with him, it's 2 years in a row of a very low ADOT and just not enough explosive plays. In his first 4 seasons as a starter, Patrick Mahomes averaged 14 touchdowns of 20 or more yards. In his last 3, I think he has 14 combined. Yeah, he's averaging, 14 combined in his last 3 and 7 combined in his last 2, where he's not throwing the ball downfield. So why are things different now than they were a year ago?
Well, one of those 3 years that you were talking about, he led the NFL in passing yards and passing touchdowns, threw for 5,250 yards and 41 touchdowns.
He had 7 touchdowns, 7 big touchdowns that year. He's had 7 combined in the last 2 years with this super low ADOT.
I think he's obviously still the best quarterback in the world. every time he actually needs to go score a touchdown, he does.
Mm-hmm.
This was a year where they were never really challenged. And so I think that the hope is that next year is a little bit more difficult for him.
When you say never really challenged,
yeah, they're in 1-score games every week.
Right, but sure. I mean, they lost
you mean like a shootout type game?
They've lost one game in the last 14 months that they were trying to win.
They win, yeah. I think, I mean, I honestly don't know if you agree with this, but I feel like I saw him miss open receivers more this year than ever before. I feel like he just didn't play that well.
Well, I think part of this, look, it's the evolution of how this team is. When he was doing this on a rookie deal with, weapons that were, like Heath just said, he may have the best receiving core of his career. It's going to be tough to beat. I don't care who the third guy is, peak Tyreek Hill and peak Travis Kelce. I mean, that's as good as you get. So, we went into this season and Heath mentioned, Rice's injury. It was also Marquise Brown's injury. That was part of this. We thought Marquise Brown was going to be one of the big pieces of this offense, and Rice coming back from what he did a year ago, and maybe Kelce would, play a little bit more of a typical role as opposed to what we saw last year until they got to the playoffs. So I think the thing that evolved with this team is the offensive line has not been as good. They've had to mix and match, some guys, obviously, Tooney moving to left guard to left tackle. The receiving core wasn't as good. And then when he got Worthy going and got Marquise Brown back on the field, even if Brown didn't do very much, it was still another element that defenses had to account for. And then you see what he's still capable of doing. So I don't know if he's ever going to get back to fantasy-wise being top 3, unless, of course, he wants to. And Reed wants him to. And they allow him to go out there and throw the ball probably 45 times. And then you're going to get these type of numbers again. But to Heath's point, I think, and this is what you're getting at, they didn't have to have him do that. And so I just don't know if he'll ever get to that again. Like Burrow, I think, has to do that on a weekly basis until that team, retools his defense completely. The other guys around Burrow are all runners. Allen's a runner. Jackson's a runner. Hurts is a runner. Daniels is a runner. Mahomes is not going to do that until the playoffs. So I think when you start to look at QB6 on, and that's a very, buffet of guys, a big buffet of guys, of Baker and Goff and Kyler and all these other quarterbacks that we've discussed. Like, I would feel more comfortable in Mahomes over those guys, but I don't think he's going to crack the top 5. At least he won't for me. Those other 5 guys are locked in.
Okay. All right. So that's Heath's list: Mahomes, Pacheco, and Hockenson. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll look at Jamey's list of bounce back candidates, and we'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. Well, I thought maybe no bias in Jamey's list, but it appears that Jamey is just a big AFC East guy from his days growing up as a Dolphins fan. I didn't realize that lingered, Jamey. Who 3 bounce back candidates?
So much like Heath, I did not look at the schedule. Much like Heath, I just looked at, in my mind, I was like, all right, I'll start with the AFC East and then just kind of work my way back. And so I was like, oh, Breece Hall, okay, he was on the bust list last year. We know he was better than that. All right, who else in the AFC East? Oh, yeah, Jaylen Waddle. Okay, there's potential there. I'm like, all right, Patriots, anybody? Oh, it's with Stevenson. All right, I'm good.
All right, fair. So you got Breece Hall, Jaylen Waddle, and Rhamondre Stevenson. Go for it.
So Breece Hall is clearly some low-hanging fruit. I mean, he was great 2 years ago. We drafted him based on average draft position as the number 2 overall player, second running back behind Christian McCaffrey, and he finished as RB16, both I think in total points and points per game in PPR. So he had a disappointing season, but there were obviously some things that you like, and clearly if they get things on track here, I do think that we'll see probably a little bit more shared work because Braylon Allen deserves to get some touches. If Aaron Rodgers is back, does he have the same touchdown potential? But before the Devontae Adams addition, he was doing a better job from a reception standpoint. We know that's something he could do as good as anybody in the league. He showed that coming back from the ACL tear 2 years ago. So there's a lot to love about what Breece Hall still brings to the table. It was a disastrous finish for him. It was a disastrous season for the Jets overall. But it wouldn't shock me. I don't know how you guys feel about this. If he's a top 5 running back again in 2025, he's just got that much upside, that much potential.
Why don't you go ahead and run through? We'll get to Hall again in a second, but go through Waddle and Stevenson.
So Stevenson is a lot to do with what the personnel should be for the Patriots and the system and coaching staff for the Patriots. I mean, Mike Vrabel's got a history of leaning on his run game. Josh McDaniels has gotten great production out of his running backs. Right now, Antonio Gibson, I don't think is a threat to take Rhamondre Stevenson off the field on first and second down. We'll see if they bring in somebody else. They can clearly draft somebody. It's a loaded class. But they did give him a big contract extension or a significant contract extension prior to last year. And so, again, another guy that has shown us the ability to be a good fantasy option. He's not as talented as Breece Hall by any stretch. But if they can fix the offensive line, I think Drake May is going to be much better in year 2 than he was in year 1 because of the coaching change. And so if Stevenson's the featured back in Josh McDaniels' offense with a guy that has the ability to catch the ball in the backfield, I think he's going to end up being one of the better value picks on draft day.
Okay. Did you get to Waddle or no?
Oh, and then Waddle, look, he you mentioned this in terms of the things that we learned and, players dealing with injuries. He was banged up in camp, spent a lot of time, dealing with injuries. There's, two things with Jaylen Waddle. Again, one would be low hanging fruit. Clearly there's huge bounce back potential if Tyreek Hill leaves. We'll all be drafting Jaylen Waddle relatively high if Tyreek Hill's no longer on the Dolphins. But I don't think he's going to be as bad as he was this season. He's had 2 really good years in the NFL. In his first 2 seasons. Last year was extremely disappointing. He could still be a 15-point per game guy. If they get back to, throwing the ball downfield a little bit more and being more explosive, I think he benefits, more so than Jonnu Smith, for example. So based on the cost, I mean, we were drafting this guy back into round 2, early round 3. He's probably going to be a round 5 pick would be my guess, round 4 at the earliest. I'll buy into that all day with what Jaylen Waddle still has to offer.
Waddle went 39th overall in our half PPR draft. So that is the 3rd pick of round 4. Mike Evans was the wide receiver drafted before him. Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp. We get to a pretty weird group of wide receivers after that. Adams, Kupp, Olave, Flowers. Just a big group where you could really see any order depending on personal preference, including Jaylen Waddle, I'd have to say. Heath, do you agree or disagree with Breece Hall, Stevenson, and Waddle?
So I think Waddle is the one that's easiest to agree with. Even if Tyreek Hill is back, I can't see them going with the same offensive philosophy that they did this past year. And I think we'll see more downfield throws. I think we'll see more big plays from Jaylen Waddle. And so I think he definitely bounces back, if not all the way to what he was in 2022, at least what he was on a per game basis in 2023. Hall's interesting because he finished in 2023 as RB2 overall, but it was largely because he played 17 games. I think he was RB7 on a per game basis. I think better about Stevenson bouncing back to what he was before last year than I do about Hall bouncing back to what we expected him to be this year. Maybe I'll feel different after I see who's in charge of the Jets offense and who's playing quarterback for them. But this might just still be a terrible offense.
Jaylen Waddle was wide receiver 22 per game in 2023 when he had 1,000 yards, roughly 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns in 14 games. Do you think he bounces back to that wide receiver 22 range or to awesome player, the guy that we were drafting in the 2nd, early 3rd round because of what he did in 2022? What's more likely?
I believe the 2020. Well, I mean, more likely is obviously the low end number 2, but I think that's about my expectation too.
Jamey,
Somewhere in between.
Okay. All right, I mean, I got ready. I'm gonna play devil's advocate on all of them. Number 1, Breece Hall, 2 years in a row where he has been like Ken Walker, just one of the worst running backs in terms of 0 or negative yard carries, just home run or bust, and the home runs haven't come as often. And then I asked myself with Breece Hall, what is going to get better about his situation next year? I do think that the Devontae Adams thing, he was on pace for 96 catches before the Adams. No, sorry. I think that was targets. He was on pace for 74 catches before the Adams trade, on pace for 53 catches with Adams. So that's one thing. But what's going to get better about the situation? I don't know. Waddle, he's only had 1 great year. I mean, he did have a good rookie season. He had so many targets. He had so many catches, but he's only had 1 standout year. And it was a year where he had a lot of long, big plays. Other than that, the guy never gets targets in the end zone, in the red zone, in the green zone. It's so low. Same problem that Olave has, I'm going to talk about soon. And then Stevenson, He might just not be that good, and he fumbles a lot. So take that, buddy.
A great devil's advocate on Stevenson.
Well, it's true though. I mean, I things could definitely get better for him. They got a lot of cap space. They can go out and get the best guard, Trey Smith, out there. They could draft an offensive lineman with the 4th overall pick. They could upgrade their offense. They've got a better offensive coordinator probably. So I can see things getting better for him. I just don't know how good he is. But he's a late-ish round, mid to late round pick. So it's not like a big gamble or anything. But what do you think about Waddle specifically, Jamey? Just, I don't know how he gets back to what he did in 2022. Because, Heath, you said they're going to throw the ball downfield more. I do think that Dave, if he were here, would probably say Devon Achane has really killed Jaylen Waddle's value. And I think there's actually a lot of validity to that. Yeah, I'm sorry. Jamey. My bad.
I do think that, we see scenarios like this happen when, especially, it might be magnified a little bit. You have a very disgruntled Tyreek Hill right now. Does he come back in the good graces of Mike McDaniel and Tua because they couldn't find a trade partner, or they really want to make this work? Or do we start to see maybe a little changing of the guard as well, where Jaylen Waddle gets a little bit more opportunities, to your point about him not getting some red zone touches? I do think he was playing hurt a majority of the season. I think that's a big part of that. Yes, certainly Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith, both guys were a big, detriment to what Jaylen Waddle was able to accomplish last year, clearly. But let's not forget, they missed 4 games with Tua Tagovailoa. You could factor that into his, his outlook moving forward. I know one thing that Heath talked about last year, which I was totally on board with, that if Tyreek ever misses time, we saw the game against the Jets 2 seasons ago and just how great he was. Tyreek played through a wrist injury. He's going to be 31 years old. Again, there's the chance of him leaving. So that changes everything about this conversation. But I just think there's a lot of upside still with Jaylen Waddle. And now the cost is a little bit depressed. So, 39th overall in an analyst draft with no rookies involved, that probably pushes him to, mid 40s would be my guess. And that's great value for me.
So to your point about Dave, Adam, I think he was definitely right last year that it happened. I just think it's a really bad plan, and I hope that they saw that. Devon Achane has been one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL, 5.6 yards per carry. That's incredible for his career. Even 4.5 last year was good. 6.1 yards per touch, 6.4 yards per target. Those are very good. Jaylen Waddle has each of the last 3 years been 9 yards per target or better. We can't have 83 targets going to Jaylen Waddle at the expense of throwing the ball more to Devon Achane and getting fewer yards.
Mm-hmm. I hope you're right. All right. Those are.
I feel they want to be more ball control and not, putting their defense in.
That's what they wanted. Yeah.
That's what they wanted last year for sure. Yeah. And it just didn't seem like that worked out very well.
Well, I think it may have worked out for them if Tua stayed healthy, because they probably go 2-2 at worst in those 4 games that he missed. My guess would have been 3-1. They played some real crappy teams in that 4-game stretch. So you tack on 2-3 wins. They're not winning the AFC East, but they're in the playoffs.
Yeah, they could have definitely lost to Buffalo with that. But no, you're right. I mean, they were not a bad team by any means. With Tua.
Well, they were offensively during that stretch. They were terrible.
Yeah, no, I'm saying with Tua. They're horrible without him. Yeah. All right. Let's go to my bounce back candidates. I've got 3 of them as well. 2 wide receivers and a quarterback. To the surprise of nobody, Trevor Lawrence is on my bounce back list. Chris Olave and DK Metcalf. You could say about Olave, oh, well, he got hurt. Of course he's going to bounce back. I'm talking about he's going to bounce back just from what he did in the first 5 games of the season when he and Derek Carr and Rashid Shaheed were all healthy. It really wasn't that good. So I'll start with Trevor Lawrence here. And I just want to point out with Lawrence, what am I expecting to bounce back to? Top 15 quarterback.
An imaginary thing that we've always thought that he was.
Top 15 quarterback. Realistic, could easily be 12th. But you could see a scenario where he has a great year. Could he be the next Baker Mayfield? There's an obvious comparison here. We've got Liam Cohen. I've been pretty down on Doug Peterson for a while. Trevor Lawrence, here are a few areas where I think he can and will improve. Number 1, his ADOT, or air yards per pass attempt, second highest in the NFL. Over 9 yards. Ridiculous. That needs to come down, and it will. I'm not just going to compare him to Baker Mayfield, but Baker Mayfield had a pretty low ADOT. Why am I, if in case you're confused, Liam Cohen was the offensive coordinator and play caller for the Bucs. Now he's the head coach for the Jaguars. Yards per carry. He didn't really run that much less, but he averaged like 2.6 yards per carry, Trevor Lawrence. Very strange. He could get back to being a 20-yard per game rusher, about 350 yards per season. Green zone pass rate. This is something that the Jaguars in his 4 years have never been all that high in. They haven't been an aggressive team inside the 10-yard line. They've run the ball a lot. The Bucs had the 7th highest green zone pass rate. Again, I'm not saying it's going to translate. It's going to be the same exact play calling, but at least you have something to give you optimism there. And he's been, in his career, for whatever reason, Trevor Lawrence has just had a really bad success rate on his end zone throws. Maybe he's bad at it. Maybe he is, but he's thrown the ball a lot in the end zone. His completion percentage is horrible. So I'm hoping that the yards per carry come back up and he's more like a 350-yard rusher. If he throws there were only 2 quarterbacks that had 4,000 yards and 350 rushing yards last year. I think he could easily be in that group. He's thrown for 4,000 yards twice in his career. And I just think Liam Cohen is going to bring out the best in him. And he's got a wide receiver that's going to be drafted in the first round in a lot of drafts. Still has good weapons. I think Lawrence is going to be a stream-worthy quarterback. Olave went as wide receiver 23 in our latest half PPR mock draft. To me, I drafted him 47th overall. I think that's where he belongs. I don't think he's going to be great. Kellen Moore is probably going to be his head coach, it seems. We'll talk about that when it happens. Is another guy who doesn't get enough red zone or green zone or end zone targets. But that changed for Terry McLaurin. I think Chris Olave is basically Terry McLaurin. Reliable wide receiver. He should be, I think he'll be something like wide receiver 20. And DK Metcalf, I also think will be something like wide receiver 20. He went as wide receiver 32, 63rd overall in our latest half PPR mock draft. He was pretty good the first half of the year before his injury. I don't expect anything from Tyler Lockett at this point. They're going to throw the ball less. They want to run the ball more. I know that, but it's going to be really those 2 main guys as I see it now, JSN and DK Metcalf. He might be second on the team in targets. I still think he can get to 120 targets and be a top 24 wide receiver. He'll be a good value if he makes it to round 6. Bam.
That's like the least inspiring group of bounce backs I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, these guys are going to be low-end starters or high-end bench players for you. Mm-hmm. Get excited, people.
I see that. And I will say this. When I sent the email with the names, Lawrence, I wasn't going to make the case for Lawrence as like a top 5 guy. But Olave and Metcalf, I was like a little disappointed when I did the research and what I felt their upside could be. Because Metcalf has only been great when he has had great quarterback play. And he's not going to have great quarterback play, in my opinion. And he's probably going to be second on the team in targets. Olave, again, I just think he needs better targets. But I do think, like, one thing I think is going to change for Olave, I don't think he's going to be out-targeted by Rashid Shaheed. And that was the case in the first 5 games of the season when everyone was healthy. That's going to change. Rashid Shaheed's target rate was way too high for a guy who had an ADOT over 17 yards. But yeah, I think they could be good values that people overlook because they're not exciting, especially Olave and Metcalf. The shine has worn off. And honestly, you look at a guy like Terry McLaurin and you see the talent that he had, and you couldn't predict that he was going to have this kind of season. But you could say that, you could say with Olave and Metcalf that they have a pretty good floor as a reliable number 2 wide receiver. And maybe they will have that surprising McLaurin-like season because they are super talented players. It could happen for them. So, for example, he went after Cooper Kupp, Chris Olave. There's no chance I'd take Cooper Kupp ahead of Chris Olave. I'd probably take Metcalf over Cooper Kupp at this point. And they went like 12 spots apart.
That's easy, I think, for most people to make that choice. It is funny that you have Olave and Metcalf because one is losing Kubiak and one is gaining Kubiak. Yeah. I do think that there's still a lot of upside with these guys. Olave clearly was drafted last year as somebody that we thought was going to have the ability to have a breakout season. The one thing that I think is different with the McLaurin comparison is McLaurin got a quarterback change.
Yeah,
these 2 guys are not getting quarterback changes, so they're still stuck with Derek Carr and Geno Smith respectively. And as you just alluded to, Metcalf has not been great with subpar quarterback play. So can Geno Smith get back to what he showed in his first season as the starter in Seattle, which was still a very good year for Metcalf? It was before JSN ascended to the level that he's at right now. I don't think Olave is going to lose targets significantly to Rashid Shaheed. Their receiving core is abysmal right now. So, there's a lot to like still about Olave's situation and Metcalf's situation, I think, based on the cost. The thing about Lawrence is he's probably, we started the show about, Matthew Stafford, and I wonder where, those two guys will come out in comparison to each other based on how people draft. My guess is more people will lean toward Lawrence because we'll get a lot of offseason hype again because Cohen there, Brian Thomas and Lawrence were never really on the same page. I hope that that's something that materializes because all of Brian Thomas's best games came with Mac Jones. Will Evan Ingram stay? Will Christian Kirk stay? You mentioned the receiving core there. So there's some things that could be in flux. So these guys all do qualify. I'll be a little bit more positive than Heath was as bounce back guys. I'm much more interested in the receivers than Lawrence, but I can certainly see myself, if I have a deep enough bench, we're in the 6+ bench, formats that if I want to take a second quarterback with upside and I like my starter, so it's a throwaway pick essentially. That Lawrence could certainly be one of those guys that if he hits, he could still hit big, but there's just, we're running out of time for him to, prove that at this point.
Sorry, Heath, before you jump in, I got to go to break.
Okay.
So quick commercial break, and then Heath will talk about Lawrence, Olave, Metcalf, whoever he wants to talk about, and then we'll read a couple of emails at fantasyfootball@cbsi.com, and we'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. All right, we're back. Heath, tear it apart.
No, I don't want to tear it apart. I'll just say that, if you don't count the game where he got hurt, Trevor Lawrence basically averaged 18 fantasy points per game last year, which was QB 19. He had his highest yards per attempt of his career last year. He had his second highest touchdown rate of his career last year. I think we're using him bouncing back to he just kind of was what he has been last year.
So yeah, I'm hoping he can bounce back to 2022 when he was 12th per game, 11th per game. He had 4,100 yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and he had 291 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. He's been pretty good with rushing touchdowns, probably based on his last 3 seasons, probably get about 4 rushing touchdowns. Yep. So I'm hoping he can bounce back to 2022. He was number 7 quarterback overall, number 11 per game. But also, I talked about lessons learned. One of the lessons learned that I said yesterday was we're not great at evaluating players because it's situations and coaches and talent around them matter so much. And he's had a really bad offensive line, and it's possible he's had a bad coach. So I do think he's got the potential to be the next Baker Mayfield or the next Sam Darnold. I'm sorry. I'm not giving up on Trevor Lawrence yet. I think if he has right now, I'm thinking that he's a top 15-ish quarterback, but I still think he could be that big surprise and have a huge year. I mean, good. If anyone has all 22, watch the first touchdown catch of the year that Brian Thomas had, week 1 against the Dolphins. This is one of the most underrated throws that I've seen all season. This guy is so talented, just has to put it together. You can, I understand you laugh at me. I've been on this hill for 3 years. So
no, I'm not laughing at you. I just we all have guys that I think it's okay to do that.
So they're all laughing.
That's the nice thing. A quarterback's terrible as a rookie, you can just cite Josh Allen.
Yeah.
But throws 2,000 passes in the NFL and shows himself to be average, you can just say Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold turned out to be good in good situations. So I think it's fine. I'm not going to laugh at you anymore. I think Olave is a good, he was 9 fantasy points per game last year. That's a very good bounce back candidate. He'll probably be a low end number 2 again. I don't know what to expect in the Seattle situation because I do think we're as you've talked about, we're going to get a more run heavy offense.
Oh yeah.
And so it really is going to be a battle between DK and JSN because I don't think the number 2 wide receiver in this offense is going, unless they have a Rashid Shaheed type impact where it's just a bunch of big plays. I don't know that the number 2 wide receiver is going to be that good.
I also don't think we saw the best of Kubiak's offense, just because you had Carr getting injured, you had Olave getting injured, you had Shaheed getting injured. It was just a mess all across the board. at different times, but a lot of big time misses for several players. So it's certainly there's still potential for these guys. They're very talented receivers. That's the thing. And so I didn't really agree with your sentiment that the shine is off these guys. They're still I think a lot of people that will be interested in them at the right cost.
Well, look, I don't have much to base it on. I couldn't get the results. I don't know if you can get them. The results of the PPR mock draft we did. You have to renew the league because I got locked out. But the half PPR mock draft, the story's published on the website. And I don't know how far Olave would have fallen. I took him 47th, and then Metcalf went 63rd, I think I said. He went in round 6. So
that seems unrealistic.
I have absolutely no idea. It doesn't seem that unrealistic to me, honestly.
Well, if you're saying that Cooper Kupp went 2 rounds ahead of him,
of Metcalf, yeah,
that's unrealistic.
1 pick ahead of Olave, 1 or 2 picks ahead of Olave. Can you get the PPR results or no?
Probably not.
All right, see if you can. I'm going to read some emails. fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. This is from, I don't have a name on this one. Sorry. Hey, Manny, Mo, and Jack. Manny, Mo. No, just kidding. This is the Pep Boys. I just picked up remember the Pep Boys with those big heads? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I picked up an orphan dynasty team. And
good.
I've been playing.
Really hoping that the day before we do a mailbag that I've been advertising all month long, that you would just read the dynasty questions we have in the email.
Are you using this one?
Yes.
Oh, skip it. Watch the Dynasty show tomorrow. Sorry about that. All right. Then we got this email from Scott. Last year, after our rookie draft, I traded Ladd McConkey, which was my 10th pick. Oh, you're using this one too?
Emails tomorrow. See you guys.
Yeah, I can send out a Twitter request for dynasty questions. I just searched through our emails and looked for the questions that were about dynasty and thought that I would use them for the dynasty mailbag tomorrow. That's okay.
I didn't think you got all of those emails.
Well, I had to search for them. They don't just show up in my inbox regularly.
Oh, okay.
So just to recap today, Heath did not know we were talking about bounce backs until you sent him an email yesterday. You did not know that Heath is doing a Dynasty mailbag show tomorrow and stole all of his Dynasty email questions.
Correct. Yeah.
Got it.
I actually think I did know that.
Yeah, I told him, I mentioned it on this show on Tuesday or Monday when he asked me what's going on with FFT Dynasty this week.
Yep. Man, Jamey, why can't we get the results of this draft? I'm so curious. All right. Well, how you guys, what are you guys up to this weekend?
A lot of sports, a lot of kid sports.
No basketball for me this weekend.
No basketball. I am. I have one child traveling with my wife. They're going away. Going to Philly to celebrate the Eagles.
I'm just going to look at. Sorry, I don't care what you guys are saying. I was just looking at other rankings.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Mike Clay's rankings for 2025 from ESPN. He has DK Metcalf as wide receiver 27 and Chris Olave as wide receiver 28. See, looking at Fantasy Pros right now, they have Olave as wide receiver 35 and Metcalf as wide receiver 24. Okay.
So 3 of those 4 are pretty much in range with your expectations, right? Like 27 is basically a low-end number 2 wide receiver.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think they'd be good value. They're going like on Mike Clay's rankings. They're right ahead of Jerry Jeudy, Jamison Williams, Roma Dunze, Jaylen Waddle.
I'd rather have Waddle.
Yeah. At least we didn't have construction going on in today's show.
Dan Schneider sitting in a construction zone yesterday. Oh, all right. Listen, I gotta go. This has been fun. I gotta go.
Great emails. Good job.
I'm doing a Dynasty mailbag in 5 minutes. If anybody wants to,
you guys should do it, Adam. I think you should go on the show with Heath and do the mailbag with him.
That's fine. I will.
Fantastic.
Oh, what time?
11:30. Same time we do FFT Dynasty every day.
I think that's okay. I have a lot going on tomorrow. I'm not sure I could commit to this.
Yeah, I would love to see what your a lot going on list.
I have
an appointment.
The plumber coming between 8 and 10.
So far from the course.
Terminator between 9 and 12, and a contractor coming sometime around then too. So it's really out of my hands. Yeah, busy day.
Construction zone.
Yeah, there we go. All right, we'll talk to y'all tomorrow on Dynasty, and we'll talk to you on Monday on Fantasy Football Today. See ya.